sketch. There's the river seen from underneath. So it's just like the solidified air mass of the cone with what surrounded it, almost like the cast, like the shuttering which you remove, so you're left with a transparent block. This, and I thought too, when Nancy brought up the subject of how the paintings are done, rather than applying with a brush, I take a piece of sponge to the handle of an X-Acto knife and tap, 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 dipping it in the oil painted in on the canvas. But you need masks so you don't run over the area. For example, you can see where, there's the shadow of a boat. I think that's a boat that's near, that's a man upside down, and those are paper clips. And there's one of the discs for the code on the right-hand side. That in a way, this is a sort of inverted painting. If you could think of a way of piecing these together, you would have another picture of some as yet undefined relationship to the actual painting. But what it is escapes me at the moment. But in a way, the masks become as important as the painting. And the dean at Cornell, later at Buffalo, thought of this when he saw the masks. He found them much more interesting than the painting. And in a way, I sort of agree with it. Anyway, next. Yeah. All right, now just a few more. Coming back to the perspective notion, this is actually, believe it or not, a picture plane. You all know what we're talking about, these perspectival terms. So the picture plane is the plane upon which the picture is cast. And it's usually arranged in perspective, isn't it, to be between the eye and the object you're projecting, the actual object. Well, of course, there is no real picture plane there. So if such a feature exists at all, it's probably the retina of our eyes, because there the light rays come through, they are inverted, shaped by the lens and projected on the retina at the back of the eye. And of course the retina is part of a sphere. So maybe it's logical to assume that a picture plane should be spherical rather than flat. What they've done here, old-fashioned drawing, long time ago, this is the plan of the picture plane combined with the elevation. And that's actually the observation point, I think in the elevation, sorry, the plan, and that's the one, all the other way around. I think that's the observer point to the elevation. So then we go on to the next one and start to put on that picture plane the image of this temple. So it's still the same project. An existing building built in 1780 on the Regatta Course, a beautiful little temple. And there's a light fixture with a light on the end of it which projects a floodlight onto the dome. And the shadow shape, which is actually wrong here, I discovered, the shadow shape, as the light moves around, the shadow shape is changing all the time. And you catalogue those shapes as it moves and are able from that to compose an underwater craft. Won't go into that too much, but that's done using Chinese sticking. Don't you think that's very soft and nice, the light, intense light falling on the columns there? Of course, they're all bent because of the perspective. Chinese sticking is where you rub a black stick on a slate, add water, and you get this liquid, and you filter it through a pipe, and you apply it very thinly with many layers.
Can you do that? Have you used?
No, no one would, not anymore.
That's why it should be 17.
Yes, that's why it took me 17 years. Yeah. Next. Oh, we have a little animation for your delight and delicate. Don't start it yet. In a project called the Drive-In House. And this is a daft project, if ever there was one. It imagines, this was really 1960s actually, it imagines that there are certain parts of the house, which is true actually, you shouldn't imagine it. You could break down the contents of the house into the permanent, fixed, heavy items like oven, like fridge, like four-poster bed, whatever. And there are other things which are temporary, very light, things you can carry with you. And those could be all packed into a little car, an electric runabout, that would run about on tracks of a building, much as in the first project. And here we are with the heavy core items there, all those grey things. And then you have the little orange cars, like that. And this would be the condition where the housing is quite empty. It's the middle of the day, everyone's gone to work or wherever they want to go. And so we set it in motion. Let's see if it works. Ah, yes. And more cars are coming in, so the building gets bigger. You see? Bigger and bigger. The tracks are appearing from nowhere, but don't worry about that. But it was somehow the notion, which I found very fascinating, about the building, the size of the building being dependent on the number of people in it at any given time. Let's show it collapse now. Can we do this? Oh, well, never mind. That'll do. Yes. Yeah, Dennis Crompton made this animation. I was once actually at a lecture given by Tom Main in Syracuse, and the cell phone went off round about, you felt the lecture was winding down, and then the cell phone went off, and everyone looking around, whose cell phone is that? Turned out to be Tom's himself. And so he pulls out, halfway through the description of his latest project, pulls out his cell phone, answers it. Oh, hello dear. Yes. Time for you to come over. And quite obviously he had said to her, well before the lecture started, give me a call at 6 because I think I'll have said enough by then. And I thought it was a very nice thing to do. So maybe that's the reason why yours went off. I should have let Nancy. No, Nancy would say to her, hey Buster, I could quote. Yeah, well you do that, don't you? You do that. This was one, it looks so beautiful in its high-res version. What a shame the red changes. But this is a variant on the house, which I realize is very much like if you go to new suburbs built outside Denver, there are houses there which have the garages in front of the house. You know how it used to be, the stoop was in front of the house. The mum and dad and the kids would sit out on the stoop of a summer evening, and the neighbours walked by, and you'd say, oh, hi Jim, how are you? my attempt at American accent to show you how I do an Englishman trying to do an American accent. And I realize this project is exactly that, but there's a much more intimate connection between the car and the house it's entering. So in the first one, you have the car driving into the intake tube, and it stops like that. And it goes into a rotating drum. And I've shown here, again, can't get rid of a good idea, the representation of the center of vision. We assume the driver is looking straight ahead. And you all know about this convention in architectural drawing, that you put the entry to the building along the bottom edge, so that when you look at the plan, you're reading up like that. That, I believe, is a convention. So the entry then has to be like that, reading up. But also, we should maintain the center of vision, also looking up. This is a sort of as yet undesigned house, using the solar path diagram as something to go with. And here's the sun. As this starts to rotate, the sun is also moving like that. And in 2, we still need to have the line of sight of the driver looking up. So the whole building has to rotate around that. So now the intake tube is there. And the drum rotates so that the cold air of the intake tube is kept from entering the interior. Very clever, that, by the way. There's the interior of the house, rudimentary. The last one, the car's doors has opened, and the car is now fully inside the house, and becomes like an energizer. The house is an empty shell until the car moves in and warms it and heats it and so on. Now the intake tube is over there. The same happens in reverse when the guy leaves. Let's go on. I think there's one more. Oh yeah, the animation. I wanted to make the entry drum much cleverer than I have it there. And here's the Wankel engine put into NSU and Mazda cars. I had this engine at home. I'll tell you how it works. Air and gas come in there, into that chamber, and are compressed by the rotation of the rotor. And the same rotor pushes out the exhaust gases once the spark plugs fire there and there. But how beautiful to have that triangle rotating within that double semicircle shape, where the center line of the figure is actually along there. And that's the crankshaft there. As this rotates, it turns the crank. And so, if only I could devise a clever way like this of having the car enter the project. Okay. One variant. The car comes in, slows down, and these panels open to allow the car to enter. An inset, that by the way is brown cut through, wrong color. There's outside brown, more of that same tone, dot tone covering. There's the miles per hour of the car as it slows down to nothing. And I wanted to do a version of this drawing. I could do that in the computer where the drawing is stretched. Because you would have, if it was losing its losing 12 miles an hour in that distance. It's losing 8 miles an hour in that one, 6 in that one. So you could make a time drawing of that, where there was a gradual distension of the tube until it was infinitely long when you got to 0. So one thing is that all these absurd projects, they all have common themes running through them, no matter what the apparent subject, perspective, infinity, and so on, even though the form they take is very different. Is that the last one? Yeah, that is the last one. So, I think all the projects shown have in common certain themes. And I would be happy to take questions. Now, since I'm as deaf as a post, you'll need to shout it out or have some sort of accomplice who will relay the question to me. There's one over there. Yeah. Hello, Ben.
Good afternoon, and hail to the Prince. At the beginning of your talk, you made this really provocative remark that basically one's life is over by the age of 22 creatively, and that thereafter there is this wonderful journey to confirm and maybe reiterate what has happened before. So I've got 2 questions. One, is it a good idea to go to architecture school? And 2, what actually what can you see now that you could not see when you were 20?
Wait, what was the first question?
The first question is it a good idea to go to architecture school?
In
the
for
context
me
of,
or for a young...
Well, just anybody. I mean, in the context of you're saying that you did
No, but
most
you-
creative work by the age of 22.
Yeah, but you could have meant, I don't know if you did or not, should I be going to an architecture school talking about this stuff? No, not that. Is there any point in going to architecture school anyway?
Right. Regarding this issue of the creative spark that you so beautifully described as having come to a crescendo at the age of 22.
Well, I always thought of architecture school as a finishing school for young gentlemen and ladies. Because certain ideas are forming, and architecture school rounds them off very nicely. And also, I think, prepares one. One realizes, to quote the Bible, in my Father's house are many mansions, one realizes that within architecture there are many paths to pursue. Most of you probably will be going to some sort of practice, I presume. But even the lonely, isolated path taken by myself and others yields enormous fruits and satisfactions. And the important thing is, I suppose, to understand who one is, what one's genes are, and what one is excited about. And I think a way, the beauty, the importance of architecture school is it helps one to come to an understanding of that. The beginning of an understanding, because it sets you on the path to an understanding of oneself. What was the other one?
Well, the other question, thank you, Barry, for a beautiful insight into what the greatness of architecture school is. So the second question is, what can you see now that you could not see at the age of 22? Right, look.
What could I see that I couldn't see at the age of 20? Well, 20, and 20 is very young. That's usually what, third year, second year, third year. The future opening out suggested a life in the world of practice, which I must say didn't excite me very much. The offices I worked in, before a beneficent academy provided us with sustenance, with employment and so on, because I think one thing we all possessed was a certain love of teaching. Before that came to be realized as a possibility, the practices I worked in, I thought the buildings were absolutely awful that I had to work on. And I didn't have much enthusiasm for them. This was before Sterling really got going, James Sterling. In contrast to what Professor Pevsner said, I think the state of British architecture at the time was dismal. With a few exceptions, Allison and Peter Smithson, of course, and a few nuts. Ralph Erskine went off to Scandinavia. But the sort of jobs open to one were dreadfully depressing. And gradually learning that I could survive, if not handsomely, by being a monk. In fact, I will quote you actually, may I? David Green writing, old sport, this is an email he sent me. I always thought of you as my example of the survival of the perfect idea against the torrential onslaught of the anodyne. My monk, who refused the temptations of fame, languished romantically on the beaches of the beautiful concept, unviolated by the high-velocity quest for originality. But you are still then that monk. Maybe I should be impertinent enough to suggest that you are working without the rules in order to find out the rules of what you have done. And then there's a characteristic green disclaimer at the end. I have a large supply of such drivel if you need it. So he writes beautifully, old Dave. And I think that was the lovely thing about the CCA, actually, that one could actually be paid to be a monk. And to sit in a cell all day dreaming up wonderful fantasies, even those we were talking about. You know, you give the Mellon lecture at the end of your stay. And one of the longest I've given, my God, poor people, an hour and a half. And at the end, Phyllis Lambert, the queen of the establishment, the Mother Superior, I should say, shouted out, "What does it all mean?" And I don't know, maybe that's what you're asking, I don't know. But of course I was deaf as a post even then, and luckily I couldn't hear because I spent the last hour and a half telling everyone what it meant, what I thought it meant. And so she just gave up then, but it meant the end of Michael at the CCA. Michael will never be invited back. But anyway. Pardon? Do I have a question? Oh gosh, that's me. Yes, well, do you think, pretentiously go on, but do you think the lecture will alter your way of thinking about architecture one jot? I think I've tried to evoke a a certain scene in architecture. It happened a long time ago, and of course it's very different now. Somehow, the 60s were the age of the architectural group, where young people could gain the strength of each other to make some sort of statement in the world, because as soon as Archigram was formed, there was another group, House Rooker, then there was Super Studio. So it might be something for you to think about, why that was the age of the architectural group, and why there aren't groups today. There was also in America, there was Ant Farm. Did you ever hear of Ant Farm? Doug Michaels. Poor guy was climbing a cliff one day and he fell off and was killed. But they did some lovely projects. If ever you're interested, there's a book out of their work, because they had a show at a club there. And one of their projects, let me just tell you, they got hold, all right, this is a nice little end of the evening note, but they got hold of one of those concept cars. I think it was even the car used in the Batman movie, which had plexiglass blisters over the heads of the driver and the passenger. Do you remember that? And they built a wall of television sets, which they then set on fire, and then drove this concept car through them. They dressed up as crash dummies. Don't you think it's a lovely idea? And before, they made a videotape of it, of course, and they drove through, but before the drive, they had interviews with the dummy, of course. They drove through the wall of burning television sets, and Doug, in the driver's seat, came within an inch of losing his life because the plexiglass blister was knocked off by the television set and zoomed backwards over his head, and he was just able to duck in time. But that's the sort of thing they did. An amazing group. There you are. Yes?
I'll jump in. Given that your work is a great source of your own return to it, to reinvestigate it, it's also a great source for a lot of other people since you did that work. And the question is, do you notice that other people are taking it apart and reassembling it? And whose work do you find either particularly successful at it or really botched the job?
Yeah. Oh, but you see, I have a less sanguine understanding of the work of my pals in Archigram than I think the general feeling. I don't think it was about form giving, and I don't think it was about new technology really. As I said earlier, I think it was more about creating the scene and the architecture necessary to do that. The focus was on the scene rather than the architecture. So if I say that Foster or Rogers was influenced by Archigram, I don't really mean that, because I think Bucky Fuller and Conrad Marksman and Sir Joseph Paxton had more influence on the high-tech boys, Foster and Rogers, than Archigram did. Archigram presented the amusing notion that architecture was terrific fun and one could enjoy oneself. And it wasn't something to be taken too seriously. And I don't mean by that it was to be taken flippantly, but you could have fun with it and enjoy it. And in a way, I think that's Archigram's greatest legacy. So I mean, I'm very un-Archigram like that, because I just made buildings of my projects without really dressing them up in the displays of people enjoying themselves. There are no large figures in mind having a good time. So I'm more of a sort of monk-like maker of designs. So yes, there's a question over there.
Has your optimism changed over the years? And if so, how?
Increased. No. Oh, optimism about what? About
Is the
what?
work optimistic?
Oh, but optimistic about the present, the future, me, archigram, what? Life, my work. I'll tell you, before I shuffle off this mortal coil, I want to finish a lot of the drawings I've done. This is something else we were talking about. Where are you all, you lovely people who interviewed me? Somewhere in the audience. Hello, oh, there you are, hello, there. I was talking about two types of creative people. Sir Peter is someone who does a project, and then it's over, it's finished with. He goes on to the next thing. It was absolutely necessary for him to be like that, to have started the Archigram group. If he was the other sort of creative person who likes to revisit stuff after they've done it, he would have never had the balls or the guts to start Archigram. And in fact, when he did the Graz Museum, he teamed up with Colin Fournier, and it was Colin who worked out all the dreary stuff of talking to the people at Graz and getting them to agree. Believe me, if they had had the building they wanted, it would have been really boring. So I think there are different types of creative people. Those who kiss something goodbye forever once they've done it. The composer Schubert was like that. Once asked, what's your method of composing? He said, I start one piece, then I finish it, then I go on to the next. And I'm the opposite. I like to go back and ruminate. And I was saying to the people here that maybe that's personal vanity, that you can't bear an awful looking project to remain after you, so you have to go and revisit, destroy what you did initially, and go back and start all over again. But then, of course, that goes on forever, because once you've done the revised version, you realize its shortcomings. John Steinbeck was like that, what wrote The Grapes of Ra. He said, when I am working on a new book, I always feel, God, this is going marvelously well. Finally, something really good. And he got really excited about it, finished it in a hurry, sent it to the publishers. But by the time it came back printed with 25,000 copies, he opened the first page and thought, oh God, this is awful. How can I ever have done this? And boy, there's a boo-boo, there's a grammatical boo-boo in the first paragraph. Believe me, I tell the truth. And there's someone, that second type, you see, a creative person. Okay, so I am optimistic. Yes?
When we imagine zero environmental impact,
Interpret?
We imagine zero environmental.
what will that look like?
What will it look like?
Oh, a building with environmental impact? A project with environmental zero impact.
It only is relevant to a world.
Yeah. Well, can I mention Cedric Price here? Yeah. Cedric, the great Cedric Price. Meant to anyway. He managed to work into the RABA set of rules governing the way architects should proceed with a client. The clause that an architect may advise a client that the building, the proposed building, should not be built if he didn't feel it was necessary. That's one way of achieving no building at all. But also in the Camden Town building he did, which was a sort of mini version of the Fun Palace. Do you know, I'm descending to anecdotes now, but it had been up about 20 years maybe, and they were proposing changes in its usage. And it was such a well-known building that the Landmark Commission wanted to landmark it. And they held a hearing and invited Cedric along, of course. And he went, and he argued passionately that it be removed, that it be destroyed, because he felt that no longer was it useful. So I think there's another case of zero impact, or not quite zero, but getting near it. And I thought, you see, that's marvelous, because in the 60s, he was always talking about expendability, and the building had a natural lifespan when society, which was changing so rapidly, would find that building unnecessary. That building should be removed. And when he went to the Landmarks Commission to plead for the removal of his own building, we realized then, my gosh, the guy actually believed what he said. I mean, most architects don't. Most architects in this country who have built, say, famous houses, argue tooth and nail for their preserving. Because I knew John Johansson very well. He died recently. Amazing architect, but he didn't want anything he had done touched. He wanted it preserved forever. Yes?
To go from the sublime to the ridiculous, would you care to comment about the role played by the Prince of Wales in British architecture?
About the carbuncle. Oh, Prince Charles, he started, about Prince, what was questioned here was that, I think it was a National Gallery competition, wasn't it? And he described one of the projects, it was a competition, I think, described one of the projects as being like a carbuncle on the face of a dear friend. You know what a carbuncle is? What is it, a wart or a swelling, some sort? And he started a School of Architecture, and for a joke, I applied to go and teach there. That was about 20 years ago. I'm waiting for the reply. I don't have high hopes. I'm not sure he's even going anymore. But
He's not a fan of art.
but otherwise, he's a terrific guy. I mean, he has his own organic winery, doesn't he? And he grows tomatoes. And he says quite clever things, actually. I mean, no, I'm not completely against Prince Charles.
Coming back to the work, there's exactness that's unique, I think, in all the work. You talk about the other people were more interested in the imagery and the people placement, where yours is more about precision and also representation to the retina and so forth, and coming through this.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. Do you come back to the work to make it better, or is it a rediscovery? That's something that you missed.
We're going to make it less shitty.
Yeah.
No, that's it.
But in the process, it seems like they're finding new techniques or new ways to.
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, well, I'm running out of the
It's definitely make it less sugar.
There's a lot of garbage in my house. It's all over the bedroom. Ah, a question over here. Very good. Yeah. The question was, when are you going to clean out the house which has all the stuff in it? And I think the labours of Hercules and of diverting the river was one of the labours of Hercules, to clean out the Augean stables which divert the river through it. Maybe that would be the way to get it all out. One more.
In the beginning, was Archigram a group putting together a publication, or was it a publication that was bringing together a group? Like
The latter. All right. No, in the beginning, it sounds like the Bible. The word was made. No, I tell you that. I met Peter at a party, and then he set up Sunday afternoon tea parties. And gradually we coalesced, but then the magazine came as a broadsheet, as a single sheet. I'll say this about Peter. He wasn't dedicated to one type of architecture. He included anyone bizarre or off-key, students at the AA, anyone weird, he wanted to put into Archigram 1. So, for example, there's a guy in there who had made a drawing of stables in a medieval manner, just like something drawn on vellum, not the vellum we use today, but animal skin, and made a drawing in a projection that would have been used in about 1400 with lettering to match. Totally foreign to what Peter was up to, but Peter was interested because it was foreign, it was something different. So I mean, in a way, I can tease Peter and knock him and so on, make jokes, but he was an amazing guy. So, thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction, which was lovely. I didn't